Why is it here? What are we doing? What is that thing? Conglomerate of parts that got rescued from a farm. This looks no different than an engineering drawing. Hold on, I need to find a footstool to mount my 100-year-old airplane. Ugh. And kind of dangerous and raw and rugged and awesome venture and journey into history. Yes. What's up, people? I think today we should go back over 100 years ago to see what it was like to go fast around the era of World War I. So today we're going to take a peek at the 1917 Auburn build that's been sitting around this shop and this YouTube channel for really the last year. Why is it here? What are we doing? What is that thing? So Auburn was made in Auburn, Indiana, hence where they got the name. And a lot of you historians or pre-war car buff will of course recognize that name from the Auburn, Cord, and Duesenberg makes, which are all there. There's a very pretty museum there in Auburn, Indiana. It's actually the original showroom from the time period. So check it out if you're there. It's a nice journey into the time period. But this particular car, or shall we say conglomerate of parts that got rescued from a farm, has an interesting destiny. So this frame, this suspension, all of this stuff here had been sitting on this gentleman's farm for God knows how many decades. And he looked at it and saw this rusty pile of stuff and thought we could make something out of that. But the problem is there's no body. There's nothing here practically. So it does not make sense whatsoever to restore that into a stock car. For a number of reasons. One, cost and time. It would be an absurd amount of cost and time to make this into what a stock configured car would have been at the time. And you can kind of walk around and see it while we're chatting about it. It would just be way too much. You can just go out and buy a World War I era car for less than it would cost. But what was there was too good not to do something with. And he's a creative guy and thought, hey, we could make a kind of a period correct race car or like sportster, speedster sort of thing out of it. And he found me because I'm an eccentric goofball that can do that sort of thing and has the artistic style to take it somewhere. Now, where we're at with this build is a very interesting place. And over the next couple of months, we're going to get it to its next stage. And it's actually going to go back to its owner and then come back at a time in the future. But this is basically a restored frame and suspension and all that from the way it was sitting. And if you want to look kind of carefully at the frame right here, you can see the massively heavy pitting, literally from sitting outside for probably the last 50 to 75 years. But what's kind of amazing, while the metallurgy of the frame and the bolts and everything is not as good as now, it had some cool stuff in it that frankly kept it from rusting to the ground or into like one piece over those years. So even the differential, which is totally cleaned out and gone through, all the gears are in great shape. It looks beautiful. And so we got this stuff basically cleaned up and serviceable. And he had this particular motor, which actually had been in the family before, and transmission, which is pretty exciting. I'm hoping everything's in there and we've got something we can work with, but at least it's a start. So we got that in place, getting things lubed up already, even the original muffler for the exhaust and all that. We got a steering rack, or steering box, shall we say. It's not actually a rack. Watch me try to kill myself. And you can see it's a rack, no different than like a tractor would be, or an early race car, or anything from those time periods. But the couple of real neat things about this, if you want to kind of come to the front, this is an original hood from that time period. And we actually had a few original hoods and radiator shrouds. Come on over to the front, I want to show you the radiator. It's kind of neat too what we've done. This particular one comes to points, and we had different things that fit and work, kind of a little more like Edwardian style, sort of this edge, which gives it kind of that cool industrial look from the time period with the folded edge. So we decided to go this direction. Now this radiator, if you guys look carefully here, this is a more modern core type radiator than the original honeycomb that would have been in it. And there's for a few reasons. One, and I don't think you're going to be able to see it real well, but we took an original radiator, which had the honeycomb core, and sent it to a craftsman who removed the core, kept the tanks, and then built a brass and copper radiator that's finned like this, which will be more than adequate to cool it, and it'll look quite nice. We'll put a rock protective screen guard over it, maybe paint a number on it, typically how you would have seen Bentleys in the 20s, and it'll definitely cool really well. So that's well on the way to being great. Now the other thing, if you want to look, come here and look at this wheel together. This wheel is made of wood, okay? It really is not a lot different than your Roy Rogers garage sale coffee table wagon wheel. But no, seriously, it's a wooden spokes, a wooden rim here, and the spokes all come to a point, and you have a steel hub, and this is not a big center lock wheel. This is just a cap, which has been nickel plated. And then this holds it together, and there's bearings in it. Not much different than a modern car is. And then this is just your center cap, which is really pretty because it says Auburn in it. So that's an original piece that's been cleaned up and nickel plated, and actually it looks brand new, really. And then, so you have a wooden wheel, okay, and I gotta get this thread on there now. Come on, you old girl. Okay, here we go. So, but this is a wood wheel where it's painted blue, okay, with the steel center part, which all clamps together. And then this black here, this is a steel rim, okay? And then the tire has an inner tube, and that is mounted to the steel rim. So for instance, if we wanted spare tires or spare wheels, you wouldn't have the whole wheel. You just have tires with tubes mounted on a rim. Because if you get a flat, you just jack it up a little bit, and you loosen up all these nuts here, these like little clamps that hold together, and then the split ring pops out, and it's this kind of triangular shaped ring that jams it on, and you just slide the wheel with the rim, or excuse me, the tire with the rim right off the wooden wheel, and the wooden wheel has like a steel band around it, and then you just slide the new one over, and then you clamp it down. So that's how it works. It's really neat. So if you ever see old-timey movies with cars like this bombing around, and you see their spare tires, and there's no wheel, there's a rim, and that's how you change it. So that's pretty cool. But the wood wheels originally, and if you walk over here, I'll show you what they look like. They look pretty disastrous. I mean, this is stuff you see in old barns in America. And these are rear wheels from the Auburn because it's got the big brake drum, which is interesting because the brake drum has a band for the normal brakes on the outside, which kind of clamp down on it. And then it has brake shoes on the inside, which expand. So you've got like braking effect going on both ways. But you can see the steel rim here and the steel center, and then the wood here. So I had to send the wheels away to a place that makes new wooden spokes and restores wagon wheels and car wheels from that time period. It took forever. And yeah, perhaps I could do that, but I've never done it before, and I don't have woodworking tools. So discretion is the better part of valor, so we sent it to somebody that does it. It just took a long time. So we've got it to where we've got a frame and a drivetrain and a radiator and a hood and wheels. Now, why that's significant is right now, the way the car is, and Aaron, can you see kind of like the whole car as a whole from the side? If you want to go back there, maybe? Go on back there, because I really want you guys to see. This is kind of an interesting point of car design through history and coach building. So if you look at the car the way it is right now, this is typically how an automobile company way back in the olden times would have built a car. And then they would send the chassis with the drivetrain, with the wheels, and potentially the hood and the radiator, just like this, to a coach builder or a body builder. That's why, like, if you see Duesenberg with a Legrand body or something like that, it's because it was Duesenberg chassis and drivetrain and all, and maybe like the hood and the radiator, but Legrand is the one that built it. And there would be all kinds of different types. There's boat tails, and there's speedsters, and there's roadsters, and there's Phaetons, and there's coupes, and all kinds of stuff. So what I think is kind of exciting right now, the painstakingly long process was sort of restoring all this to get to a point. And this original hood, I believe it was like acid dipped to get everything off of it as nicely as we reasonably could. I don't know if it was acid dipped, but it was a chemical thing to get everything off there. So now we got to make it into something. And that's what you're going to see over the next little bit. And the time period is so fascinating for building. So this is going to be a two-seat race car type affair. You can obviously see where the steering wheel goes. You can raise and lower this depending on how high it needs to be. But it's tricky because the hood is tall. You can't lay down that much. But then at the same time too, excuse me, the shifter and the handbrake are way up here. So what I'm going to do is, the guys were really helpful the other day. They cut out this very nice wooden floor to go into it. And I know some of you are freaking out, oh, you're making something out of wood? Yeah, they made stuff out of wood back when. So it'd be normal to have a wooden floor. Okay, so literally, boom, floor, okay? At least now I can sit on it. So if I sit really low, which actually this is really good to see, you can illustrate, and if you look at it from the side profile, I hope you can see a lot of the car. this looks no different than an engineering drawing from the time period from the profile. But now I'm sitting in it. The clutch is obviously right here in the bell housing, and here's the actuation for the clutch. And the pedals, ta-da, old pedals. And they're going to have to be mounted to the frame, and they're going to have to be slit into the wood that come out down there. And these can be reconfigured for the clutch and the brake, but the brake pedal literally pulls a tie rod that actuate the bands on the rear wheels. In fact, this actuates the brakes in the rear just the same. I can pull it and hold it, or I can put my thumb on it and operate the brakes. So it's all manual that way. And the clutch pedal will operate directly to that bell housing. But this is kind of cool because if I get this all low down and slinky, I can, you know, this is just gonna work. We might have to actually make the steering wheel come out a little bit more if we're gonna make it all low slung. But this works because I can see out of it just fine. But the problem is, how am I gonna shift it when it's way up here? So we're probably going to work to make a remote shifter and handbrake back here, or even on the outside, depending on how it's gonna be, so that you can be like this. But I did this to sort of illustrate a point with where the rear is gonna be of the seating, and this is gonna look great. It's gonna be real low slung to see out of it and do that. So let's show this before we get at it. Now, one thing that's kind of modern, and I don't want to say it's a cop-out, but it's a way to not spend money for no good reason. Got a modern aluminum fuel tank. This is going to go sort of back in this area. I'm going to sit back in it to get an idea of how far it has to go back. So if I sit in it like this, a little bit upright, it's going to have to kind of go in that area. Now, this fuel tank is going to be, you'll never see it, it'll be underneath, and it's very nice. It even has a fuel sender, and we can put a remote fill on it with a beautiful time period correct filler cap, and it's aluminum. You could have made an aluminum one back in the day. So even though it's modern, it was no sense in spending money somewhere it doesn't need to be spent in a restoration like this. So this is going to be back in here like that. We might even offset it a little bit, so behind the seat, it'll be a bench type seat for 2 people. You can have a little bit of a trunk area, something like that. But what's going to happen is the front cowling, and honestly the firewall and the floorboards are literally going to be wood structure. There's going to be steel that comes around like this. There's not going to be doors. It's going to be sort of like an airplane where the cockpit cuts out like this and then cuts down low. If you notice the projection out of the side of the chassis here, this is one of the original ones that supported the floorboards, which would have been much larger, but we left these because we're going to cut them off. There'll be a little plate there so that when you go to get in the car, you can use this to get yourself up in the car and then sit down. So that's the way that'll work. No different than a high-wheel bicycle of the late 19th century, or frankly, getting on a horse, which is sort of funny because nobody thinks of those things anymore. So that'll be pretty cool. So it'll be steel-bodied. It'll come to here. The cowling will wrap around like this. We will probably form on the English wheel and with the hammers in the sandbag sort of just an aerodynamic lip up. There won't be any windshield of clear time period. You don't need that stuff back then. This is over 100 years ago. Just a little bit of an aerodynamic effect. Bench seat, probably just basic tuck and roll upholstery for the time period, nothing crazy there. Now where it's going to get fun is the rear, and I hope you guys are visualizing this, will teardrop back and come to sort of a round or a boat tail or a pointy sort of affair back here. But let's think for just a second. So we're making out of steel, and that's really cool and all, but for the time period, even over 100 years ago, people were not dumb. The truth of the matter is, so many of the inventions of modern times, or the ways to go fast or fly, was figured out in the 1920s, but we simply didn't have the material science, the proper metallurgies, the manufacturing techniques, or the computer science necessary to build really complicated, neat things. But people were very smart back then, and we already knew how to fly. So if we want to make a race car like World War I, then we should visit the aerospace world of World War I. Come here. So a few years back, I led the Genius Garage students of building a close replica or emulation of a Sopwith Camel biplane, the British fighter plane of World War I, same time period. And this particular airplane, instead of doing wood on the inside, it actually has aluminum ribs, but it's fabric covered like the original. The side of the cockpit is thin wood with the fabric covering. The turtle deck is also wood. And then you can see right here the wood stringers and the longerons that come all the way back of the fuselage here. But the fuselage, this is all fabric covered. So we can do the same thing with the car. And if you want to come over here, maybe you can see a little bit better. So the fuselage of this airplane is not much different than the body of the racing car Auburn will be. You can see the cockpit. In fact, you come on over here, or maybe the other side. I'll climb up to it. Maybe come on over here, if you would. Aaron's being a sport today and being the camera guy in between working on stuff. And I'm going to try to not to punch a hole in the airplane. Okay, so I'm going to try to, darn it, I need a footstool or something. Hold on, I need to find a footstool to mount my 100-year-old airplane. Ugh. Okay, if you don't have a stool, Corvette wheels, racing wheels will work just as well, right? Okay, just a normal day in the life. So you can see there's a mount here. You don't want to slip because it would be so easy to destroy this wing. I don't even want to touch it. But the turtle deck, the wood is great. But you can see the cockpit here, as well with the leather padding here on the edge. It's going to be exactly the same as the car. It's just the cockpit on the car will seat 2 people. It'll probably dip down a little further. And much of the construction techniques behind the cockpit of this airplane, which I can try to see how I want to show. I know I look like a weirdo. Whatever. It's like a horse. So behind the cockpit of the airplane here, this is a wood turtle deck to the wood ribs. And the fuselage, this is all fabric covered. We'll do exactly the same kind of thing on the Auburn. It'll just be wider and taper a little bit differently, but it's pretty cool that the time period and the engineering styles relate from aerospace to racing over 100 years ago, just as they do today in those industries. And if you want to give me the camera, I can show you a little bit while I'm up here. It's kind of a neat build that the Genius Garage students did. Okay, I got it. Yes. Going POV. What's up, Aaron?
Howdy.
So you guys can see this is pretty cool up here. But I just wanted to show you. Obviously, this is a modern replica, so you can see a tube frame in here. But we do have the wicker seat. Yes. Hey, maybe we should make wooden and wicker seats in the Auburn too. Would that be cool?
Sounds like a good idea.
Super lightweight, or just go bench. But anyway, you guys can see this here, like the fabric in between and whatnot. So I thought that'd give you a cool idea of what we can do on the Auburn. And I don't think I've gotten to come up here on the Camel, the Sopwith Camel. Oh, the reason they call these things a Sopwith Camel is because the original was a pup. And then when it became the, here you go, Aaron, I'll give you the camera back. We got to tell them why it's called a camel. Okay, hold on. Ow, my foot. Okay, here, come on around on the side. One other tidbit of information that nobody needs at all. So look at it this way. I'll walk over to the front. So this is a Sopwith Camel. The cowl is a little longer because we have a non-original engine in it. Originally, the cowl would only come to here. But the Sopwith Pup, the top of the fuselage was right about here. It was lower slung here. And then the Camel, it sort of bulges up. And if you notice, you have the cowl where the machine guns would be, and then you have the hump. And that's why they called it the Sopwith Camel, because it's got a hump. Hey, walk this way. That's not the same hump. But I was thinking Mel Brooks film. Anyway, so you guys, that's basically the way it's going to be, and that's going to be pretty exciting. In fact, 2 of the local guys that got interested in Genius Garage and want to learn and car stuff and engineering and building and machining and welding, they were working on stuff. They got really excited. This is not a Genius Garage car or project, so actually I get the opportunity to pay them for working on it, but they also get the opportunity to learn. So in regard to this, I hope this inspires some of you, not just older people, but younger people, because, like, I'll be honest, I can't relate to this car this time period. I was never there. Frankly, none of us were. My grandfather was the closest one to be able to relate, and hell, he was born 10 years after this car, and he's not around anymore. So, and honestly, this car, is it fast by any standards that we understand? No, it is not. Is it crazy and wild and woolly and kind of dangerous and raw and rugged and awesome venture and journey into history? Yes. Which is cool, and I think we can all relate to. So I would just say that whether it's an old Model A or Model T Ford or whatever, it's an opportunity for all young gearheads to figure out how things were built back then. Look at the history of engineering at the time period, whether it was aerospace or war or automobile or whatever, and build something as it would have been done in the time period. And as a note, the young guys that are helping me with this now, they're frankly just as excited, if not more excited, I shouldn't even say this, than working on the lichen. So I think that's a testament to just how much people enjoy engineering and craftsmanship. And for all you older people out there that think younger people don't care, I would challenge your view and belief by saying they do care, because I know that, but you actually have to share and mentor and cultivate and give them opportunities to get them to care. So maybe if the young people in your world don't care, that's probably a you problem, not a them problem. That's all I got, guys, but I'll come back to this, and I hope you've enjoyed seeing what's going on with the Auburn, but it's back. See you guys next time.